What's going on, my fellow edgelords? I'm Aedangraef, and today on the Untrained Ear, we're going to be talking about Sleep Token in their brand new released LP, Even in Arcadia. So, Even in Arcadia is a project that, much in the typical Sleep Token style, is supposed to be this piece of genre blending that melds styles of metal with indie, rap, gent, and several others. The production on the surface is ultra polished to a glisten. At their best, I think Sleep Token in this album has reminiscence to Breaking Benjamin in their prime. And at its worst, which unfortunately is more times than not, sound something like maybe Skillet. Now, this album, I think, the band does embolden insofar as they kind of break away from metal as the primary focus, and this is, I think, more of an R&B pop. You could even make a case for like a prog rock piece. I will stray from some of the Fantano-esque criticism here and actually say that I think Vessel, as the lead singer goes by, does I do like his voice, and while there is some touch up that's being done on it, I think it suits the style of the band really well, especially as they are sort of starting to commit to this more pop lent R&B genre than the metal side of things. I think at its core, Even in Arcadia has the potential to be a very powerful album, but winds up having some very glaring issues. Much like betting on a prized stallion, I think this album gets off to a roaring and promising start, but stumbles across the finish line with a fair amount of exhaustion and some glaring health issues. Despite what you might be anticipating, I do think there are some tracks to highlight on this piece. Look to Windward, I actually am a fan of. The track comes in with some electro synth, video game type sample. You have some eerie howls in the production, and then the strings start to pick up. You get these add in background like vocal forays on the track, and then the band jumps in. Okay, you get the gent pieces, the smashing drums, the gent bass line, and the guitar chords, which are kind of mystical. And then that pulls back. You get the rap flows, you get the genre mix thing, which is kind of trademark for Sleep Token. And I think that truly the genre switch ups are a staple for them, and they are nice. In this track, I think it does hit home. After the rap mix, you get this pullback into a reintroduction of the piano, and that adds some depth to the piece. Vessel hits a falsetto in this track, and the piano rides alone. You get vocal harmonizing to accompany that, and then the band rolls back in. There's this dramatic harmony, and there's a balance of like chaos with the instrumentation and harmony with the piano, and I just think it ends up being a pretty track. I think it's one of the shinier bits on the album, and I was happy with it. Okay, Emergence, sonically, I think is a very strong point on this album. From a musical perspective, you get an opening of piano with soft-sung vocal. There's reverb, on the vocal mix with these acoustic arpeggios. The voice filter kicks in, you get a guitar riff as a transition piece, adding some dynamic depth into the progression of the track, and then it pulls back. You get an offbeat rhythm to the rap segue, which I think is a fun little tool for their bag. And it definitely adds some adrenaline pump to the track. The second verse, you get the gent elements, and they mix in really well with the rap. Definitely spreads some gasoline and sets it on fire to the aura, I think. And then the bridge pulls back. You get atmospheric piano, reverb flows, and then you get that smooth, like prog rock chorus, which is really anthemic and inspiring. And then you get the instrumental breakdown, which is like, you know, you already have the gasoline fire, and now you've like injected it with nos, and I think it's really like adrenaline fused and just high intensity. I think the song is very atmospheric, but not without its issues, namely in the lyricism. And I'm not going to spoil that. We're going to get into the lyricism of this band later. Okay, Past Self, I felt was also worth mentioning. This is one of the pieces that's stronger and definitely not metal inspired very much at all. It's very sonically different from a lot of the metal roots that this band brings in. You get a very R&B, almost boy band-esque element to the track. The production is very simplistic on this piece. Instead, where you get the depth is in the rounds and the background harmonizing vocals for Vessel, as you get these rolling rounds, and you get like verses and choruses interlaid and interwoven over one another. It's very pretty and aesthetic to the ears. You do get a rock mix with the second chorus for emphasis. That breaks back. You get an oasis of piano for a moment. You've heard this formula like a billion times as a ballad, but I have to cede that I think that they execute it really well. And I thought it was a nice nod to, I think, where the band wants to be stylistically a little bit more. I think if you're going to evaluate this from anything like rock infused at all, it is like alt rock at its hardest. And I think it feels better as a track for them than some of the more metal stuff that I think they're not like necessarily superb at mixing. Again, we're gonna get into that later too. Damocles. This one Fantano did not love. I'm gonna stray from that actually, and I will clarify that it's not for the lyricism. However, I did like the ballad pop style that we had going with this, almost a la Ed Sheeran, save for the lyrics. I think that the piano melody to open the track up was really gorgeous. And while the lyrics themselves were not always superb, I did like the message they were trying to send, where it was speaking to like not treading the line of perfection all the time and not always like hitting these slam dunk like knife's edge throws all the time. And I think that this band, for as polarizing as they are really trying to execute a very particular vision, and it's clear that they have a very specific idea of what that looks like. And I think that this track really does a good job humanizing Vessel and by proxy the other members of the band. I wish that they would kind of exhale and do a little bit more of this, because I think that this in spirit feels a little bit more human for them, which is a good feeling. I like my musicians typically to feel human. So I appreciated this track from that perspective. The time has come. We must get into the criticism. So, off the rip, the lyricism is, I'm going to dub it video game cringe. I don't want to yuck someone else's yum, but when I think about the lyrics to Sleep Token, I think about games like Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts. I think about like shonen animes. If you know anything about these things, I think you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you don't, um, what I'm saying is lyrics that are trying very hard to capture an edgy aesthetic, but it's just coming off really tacky and like, yeah, man, there's like this wolf inside of me and it's like trying to break out, and I've just got to keep it at bay, but don't get too close or you're going to taste the claws kind of thing. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just so super clear that this band is trying to carry themselves in an air that has a lot of depth and polish. And I think that the lyrical style that they've picked to accompany that does not fit them at all, especially in the rap portions, which are particularly, I'm going to use the word cringy. I'm sorry. but particularly cringy for me. Um, I think that there are other artists on the scene who do like dark and edgy, that they could maybe learn from, for capturing that aesthetic in a way that's artistic, but not cringy. Uh, an album that released a couple weeks ago that does this perfectly would be Pirouette by Model Trees. Yeah, so lyrically, um, I'm going to go ahead and just straight out say this album is abhorrent. The next piece of criticism, I'm going to use a reference track as an example and say that this is a broad stroke brush, that is going to cover multiple tracks because I think they can all be kind of analyzed the same way. The track I'm taking is Provider. This track is extremely uninspired. Uh, it has straightforward guitar progression, even for Sleep Token, who is not really like ripping the world apart with their like guitar chords, or their you know uh, musical progression as it is. Their mixing is pretty cool, but in terms of the actual like writing, um the rap in this is particularly, I'm going to use that word cringe again. It's particularly cringe. Yeah, at the end of the day, this piece comes across as like a throwaway Skillet track. In fact, if you were to tell me that this came straight from like Skillet's Monster album, I wouldn't have been surprised in the slightest. Coming into my third piece of criticism, the band has not completely peeled away from the metal label, and there are times in this album where they are screaming, and the screaming in this album is horribly, horribly mixed. You can barely hear it, over the very booming, gent stuff that is often going on at the same time. And as a rule of thumb, when your vocalist is pushing their vocal cords like that, you need to let them have some payoff and at least let their voice share the space with the guitar. So that's a big gripe. They need to clean that up if they're going to introduce or include that in any shape or form in the future. The last one, this track could have been good, but because of the ending, it's just completely scraped from my board for having any chance. Which is Windward Baths. It ends horribly, with a fade out during an instrumental outro that, for all intents and purposes, is literally an extended breakdown. Um, as somebody who is very endeared to metal and metalcore and grew up in the metal scene and found my love for music first in metal and hard rock, I'm going to say this very plainly to whoever made the decision to do a fade out on that breakdown. What the hell were you thinking? That was abhorrent and in very poor taste and very stale and uninspired. Horrible. Yeah, so in what could have been a very powerful and dynamic album, I think this album falls short in a lot of ways. I think they have potential to do better. And I'm holding out hope that maybe that with some commitment to more of their R&B pop influence that they could achieve this. I think they have an idea of something here, and while they've existed for some time, I think that they're scoping in on a vision. And I just don't think this album was all bad. I think that there was some redemption to be had here, but they've still got plenty of work to do. Plenty of work to do. So it is with that I am thinking my baseless rating for this album is going to be a forlorn 5.